Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. I thought today we would talk about the jet matchmaking that you find in War Thunder, and the reason is it's super focused around certain BRs, and that means anything kind of outside of that area kind of gets screwed. And as somebody who's played a decent amount of jets, decent amount of propellers, decent amount of everything, you see it kind of everywhere all over jets, and it just kind of makes me sad, because as one of the major kind of things that I like to do in War Thunder is to spade vehicles. I really enjoy taking a vehicle that usually you don't see too much, giving it a big go, and seeing where it sat itself in the matchmaker. The problem with doing this is a lot of the time I run into vehicles that don't really feel great at their specific BRs. For example, right now, I'm playing the F4E Phantom 2, which feels absolutely horrendous at its BR, because you don't play at its BR. You actually play at its higher BR, because that's where most of the meta matchmaking is. You see a lot more F4Ss, for example, and then for other nations, you see other vehicles that turn up that are around the matchmaking, and then you also have many others that can kind of turn up and annihilate you out of that matchmaker too. And basically, you never really see stuff that is at your matchmaking because of the fact they're not very good as well. And this creates a disparity in the matchmaker, which we've talked about in the past. One of the big issues that War Thunder has, and I think will have going forward, is the fact that people will be drawn to machines that are good. And if they're not drawn to machines that are good, then, you know, the matchmaker actually works pretty well. But they are. So what ends up happening is you have these kind of blocks of matchmaking that people play, and then there isn't anything around them. This is the kind of black hole theory stuff that I've talked about before. So imagine that you have, like, let's say 1, 2, or 3 really good premiums around, let's say, 11.0. And this means that everything gets dragged into them. That means 11.3, 11.7, some of 12.0, but it also means 10.3 and 10.7. So if 10.3 and 10.7 gets sucked up into 11.3, that makes 10.0 incredibly strong, because they get their own little area where they can matchmake. It also means that people stop playing those 10.3s and 10.7s because of the fact that they're getting annihilated by that very strong 11.0. So the matchmaking loses those two brackets, and instead you have just the 11.0, 11.3, 11.7, and sometimes 12.0 that turns up in the area, plus the 10.0s that get creamed every once in a while. So the matchmaker becomes heavily one way, and then because, you know, BR changes haven't come in as much as they have in previous years, what ends up happening is the whole thing just falls apart, because then people just sit around the BR that makes the most sense, and all the other BRs get killed. And that just sucks, and that's something that we've seen in this matchmaker, and that's why a lot of decisions have been made which don't really make a lot of sense. For example, if you have a look at one of the key decisions that was made over the last year, over the last 2 years, the MiG-15 BIS going down, the MiG-15 going down, and the Sabre going down. Now, they're all 8.0 or 8.3 in the matchmaker, but there's a bunch of planes that weren't put down around them because they weren't played as much, basically. The Yak-23, for example, it's still at 8.7. It's fundamentally worse than all of those aircraft. I know the Yak-23 is very fun, very maneuverable, but it is fundamentally worse. The Yak-30D is in the same place, where it really should have gone down as well. You also have other vehicles in the British tree that should have gone down on top of it. Stuff like the Venom at 8.7, which is definitely not better than the other ones. When it comes to the Swift and the Scimitar, you can definitely make arguments about these vehicles being better just because of what they have access to, but the fact is you have all of these vehicles that have not been put down, which are just going to get annihilated. Another area of the game for the American tech tree around this BR is the Panthers, and also even just the F-84F, but that's another question. So the F9, F2, and the F9, F5 are 8.0, and since they moved down those monsters, they are just going to get creamed too. So they're just in a horrific place. So what ends up happening is people keep playing those 8.3s, which they were playing before, which got them forced down because nobody was playing anything else, and now they get to dominate because their statistics weren't very good, but everybody else doesn't even get to exist anymore. This is why stuff like the Demon has gone down in BR to 9.0. This is the reason why the F104s, the A and the C, should easily go up in BR, but they're never going to. And the F104C specifically, which now has 4 missiles, that compared to the A, which only has 2, is at the same BR as it, which is just a mess. And what this creates is gaps in tech trees, okay? And it creates problems going forward. This is why, when you have a look at the American tech tree, there are huge gaps from 9.3 to pretty much 10.3. Apart from the Harrier, that is the gap in that tech tree. So now you have 9.3 dominating, right? If you have a look at the German tech tree, from 9.3 to 10.7, there is one aircraft, which is the MiG-23BN, or the MiG-21 SPSK, or the Hunter F-58, right? Both of those obviously out of the Matchmaker, or if you have to either buy them or you have to research them. So in the standard tech tree, there is one vehicle that you can find which is in that area to fight with. Then, if you have a look at the Soviet tech tree, you have a similar issue. You actually have some 8.7s, which is quite nice, but you have some 9.3s, and then everything is 9.3. There is not a single 9.7 apart from the MiG-21S. There is no 10.0s that exist, and then you go straight to 10.3. So that area of 9.7, right, to 10.0 no longer exists. And this is why stuff like the Crusader was able to dominate, because it had no competition until it went up in BR. And because they've created this area where there is nothing that can really fight each other, if you find a vehicle that's around there, you're either going to get horrendously up-tiered or horrendously down-tiered. That's why stuff like 9.7s usually feel pretty good in the game, because they're getting down-tiered a lot into the 9.3s and 9.0s, because people are actually able to play them, because 10.0 doesn't exist. So this kind of shows the fundamental problem with jets in general. You have these huge BR gaps, which are controlled by the fact that people really only play very specific vehicles, and other ones you may have noticed, you know, there's a lot of premiums flying around, there's a lot of squadron vehicles, there isn't actually a lot of standard tech tree vehicles, and this is causing problems, and it has done for years, and it's just getting worse. That's why stuff like the Hunter F1 is still at 9.0, the Hunter F6 still at 9.7, even though it's fundamentally worse than the one in the German tech tree. It just basically means that all of these vehicles are really struggling in terms of their matchmaker, but nobody plays them, so it doesn't matter, and therefore people can just move on and just have a good time. And that's basically what happens with these types of vehicles. You just never see them in the matchmaker, and that's just how it works. But that to me is sad, you know? The fact that so much of the matchmaker is forced around very powerful vehicles at certain BRs. Obviously, with the J7D going down, this is actually a perfect opportunity to kind of prove something like that. The J7D is a vehicle that should have never gone down in BR, but it did because of the fact that it became a popular vehicle through people buying it through the sales, and obviously not doing very well in it because it only has access to certain types of missiles and nothing else, even though it is an incredibly good platform. Same with stuff like the J7E, why that never goes up in BR as well. So I'm hoping at some point this can kind of be rectified, because at the moment, when it comes to matchmaking, it just makes certain vehicles just completely worthless, and that just sucks. You know, the Etondard being another one, which is really hard to play until you get the missiles. But the missiles themselves, you only get 2 AIM-9Bs at 9.0. If you compare that to the Demon, which gets 4 AIM-9Bs, is faster, easier to set up, why would you ever play the Etondard? Right? Why would you ever do that in general? It's just such a weird setup for a lot of these vehicles, and it just makes them unfun to play. And that's why I've always preferred, well, not always, but over the last few years, I've actually preferred grinding naval. I preferred grinding ground to aviation, even though aviation was kind of my home for a long time in War Thunder. And it's because there are just so many vehicles right now in aviation that just do not have a hope in hell. And whenever I play them, and it seems more recently I've been playing a lot of them, it just takes the wind out of your sails in playing these areas. And I just feel awful in terms of playing them. So hopefully this can be sorted out. Another problem that has become very obvious to me is research modifications are insane for vehicles. By the way, if you want an example, have a look at rank 6 of the, rank 7 of the American tree. Have a look at the A10C. The research modifications are 300,000 RP in total. The F111F, 300,000 RP. The A7E, you also have 300,000 RP. Then you have the F4E Phantom, which is a whole BR bracket lower at 11.3 or 11.0, depending on the matchmaking. That's also at 300,000. And then the F4J is at 300,000 too. So you have vehicles that are nowhere near each other in general BRs, depending on what game mode you're looking at, right? Sometimes they are 1.0 between them, sometimes they're 0.7 between them, and they are insanely expensive. And then if you have a look at the F14A, which is at rank 7, there's only 10,000 RP more in total RP costs for the vehicle. So grinding through some of these vehicles, which are nowhere near the meta vehicles, is really tough, not just from a point of view that you have to kind of, you have to get through the sludge to get to the nice stuff. It's also the fact that they're as expensive to modify as the most meta vehicles that are even at way higher BRs. Like the F15E right now, if you research all of its modifications, 314,000 RP. It's at 13.7. It's a 420,000 total RP vehicle. Why does this thing only have 20k more modification RP than an F4E Phantom 2? Why has the modifications for rank 7 vehicles not been reduced? Why did we just miss that? Why have they not done this? They usually do this, but they just didn't do it this time. So now it's just fundamentally harder to grind out a lot of these vehicles. So therefore people don't touch them and go for the vehicles like the premiums, so they can get the high tier ones, which will take exactly the same amount of time to grind out, and there'll be a better experience. The whole thing just makes no sense. And after playing some of this event, it's become very apparent to me. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem, Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.